Birth, Time, Mortality by yours truly, James Holmes, 00HOCWWID, Chapter 1, Before Birth. First thing I'm going to break down is generational curses. Basically, what generational curses is teachings and the way that they adapted to certain forms of suffering and dealing with certain types of environments, the way that they adapted, the way that they survived those certain environments. If it was done in an incorrect manner or done in some form of way as escaping, those kind of actions are passed down from generation after generation. Basically, because when your ancestors had kids, those kids had to learn from those ancestors. And whatever those ancestors did in the peripheral of the child, or the way they acted around the child in certain locations, certain environments, the kid is consistently learning from these people. And they're taking in everything. They're in full-blown learning mode. They are trying to adapt to the environment. A baby's first thing they're trying to do is learn to speak. How do I adapt? What is this? What is that? They're questioning everything. But so they're looking up to the parentals that of our ancestors. And however they chose to adapt and deal, whatever addictions they had at that time, whatever demons they were facing, however, if they were living in denial and just sweeping things under the rug, the kid saw all of it. The kid was learning from them. The kid was learning how to survive, how they survived. But the thing is with every kid is their own individual. Every kid has their own way of responding to trauma, to every individual learns completely different. Not everyone's going to learn the same. So the way that, one kid took one thing, this kid probably took it a whole different way, And so they're just trying to adapt to the environment and basically abide. And, if they come up with any kind of questions, or anything, they're depending on the parental to give them the guidance that they need to, be stable-minded. However, there were time frames where, mental health didn't have the best reputation. So the parentals just helped to the best of their ability and, gave them the coping mechanisms that they have. And a lot of those coping mechanisms are extremely toxic, extremely detrimental to your mental health and overall well-being, But the thing is, the child does not question the parentals. I mean, sure, there's a time frame where the child, asked all kinds of questions, but eventually, after being silenced so much, they just start to abide. They just start to listen. They just start to learn. They just start to adapt because they don't want to anger or, be silenced. They don't like that. They want to be accepted. They're trying to survive in the environment to the best of their abilities. And if they have to learn these dysfunctional tactics and everything, and the way that you adapt to environments and the way that you may escape, they're learning everything from you. Whether they pick it up or not, you never know, unless they do so. Some, they respond to certain generational curses as, they see, the parental or ancestors, they saw them and the way that they were responding to certain things, so they might have took a route of something else. Because the thing is with every child, they have their own individual way of learning everything. They have their own individual way of surviving and how they adapted to the environment. And then eventually they turn into adults, and eventually they become parents. And the thing is when you become parents, you combine with a whole other family, because you have your family line, and then the other partner has their own family line, and so when you combine, you're just combining generational curses from each family line. So now you got teachings from both parties. But the thing is they're going to say, well, my parents did this, that, and the other when it came to raising me, but I'm going to do something different. I'm going to do my own thing. So basically, says they didn't get the proper help and proper treatment for, the trauma that they may have faced, and, everything that was basically um, everything that was normalized that they had to adapt to that shouldn't have been normalized. It all came to a detrimental outcome, but they had their own coping mechanism to deal with that detrimental outcome, so that they can just live. They just learn how to adapt to live with it. And the thing is basically in the beginning, it starts off with the rug, and that rug is passed down because your parents had parents, their parents had parents, and their parents had parents. And if you abide with the way that they adapt to the environment when it comes to acting outside the house, acting inside of the house, and so on and so on and so on, the way that they adapt and survive, they sweep everything that is bothering them, making them uncomfortable, any kind of discomfort, any kind of mental ill that was going on in their head. They just sweep it under the rug, and they would deny it because that is what they were taught. And there were time frames where mental health did not have the best reputation like it does today. So a lot of the times our previous our ancestors from previous times, you didn't speak of certain things. You didn't speak of certain things. You just denied it, and you just told everybody that you were fine. So basically, you were living a lie. You were not fine. But you didn't tell them that you were not fine, because if they find out that you were not fine, there's going to be consequences for being the difference and, speaking up about it. And those consequences were not fun at certain times. You can just go down the history of our ancestors and, just see how you were treated if you had any kind of mental issues going on. It's not pretty. So we're naturally taught to deny any of that stuff. We sweep it under the rug. We deny it. We are normal people in a normal household. That's how they want to appear. Imagery. But with every kid, when they turn into adults and they become parents, when they combine families with another person, they're going to have their own form of what they want to do when they parent. And, however many kids were in that family previously, they're going to have their own way of parenting. It's never going to be identical. That's the power of being an individual. You have your own way of surviving and adapting to whatever that environment may have been. And now you have your own individual way of teaching a child that is very codependent and willing to learn from you. But one thing that we do not acknowledge is with the evolution of generational curses, and as we carry them down to a child, is that you literally have someone who has not healed from their childhood raising a child. So therefore, mentally, they could still be they could still be a child mentally on a lot of things, because they've just learned to adapt and survive, and that was all they did. But they never recovered from a lot of the trauma that happened. So with that lack of recovery, there's going to be additional trauma that's going to be added whenever they see another child is involved in their life that is of theirs, because they might not respond appropriately to certain things that a baby may do which is just going to pile on trauma to them, because they may respond to certain things in a childish manner, which is only going to add more trauma to them in the long run, and everything that they have piled up over their childhood. It's going to continuously evolve. And, say they have one child. That one child is going to be the one that's taking the detrimental blows. It's going to take a lot of the detrimental blows. Now, the first child may be getting spoiled and stuff, but they will neglect a whole lot when it comes to an emotional side of things, because they use the mentality of spoiling to rid any kind of, emotional inconveniences that may happen, like anger, sadness, or anything like that. The parent didn't want to deal with it, so they would just spoil them in some way to kind of silence the emotion. Which is a very unstable way to deal with any kind of emotion. You want to teach them how to acknowledge those kind of emotions and how to deal with it in a healthy manner. But the thing is, from the past down of generation after generation after generation after generation, they never had healthy ways of expressing their own emotions. They all did it in unstable manners, but with each generation, they had their own way of dealing with certain emotions, so they try to teach it to that child. And whatever way they want to teach that child, that's all up to them, because every individual is their own individual. But they're going to respond to certain things if they are not fully recovered from their childhood and put to peace with all that stuff. That child is going to be learning a whole lot of stuff that it should not learn. There's going to be some times where that parental may act like a child, treat that poor baby, neglect that poor baby, whatever, to settle down, to get their mind right, and basically remind themselves that, hey, I'm a parent now, I need to do this, I need to stop responding like this, that, and the other. Or some parents, they don't even acknowledge any of that. They'll completely just neglect the scenario completely. Every parent's completely different. But the thing is it's very devastating for that upcoming generation, because that baby is in learning mode. And if it acknowledges that you're teaching it how you deal with the way that they're acting as a baby, sure, they're not going to remember a lot of it, but they're still taking it down. They're still taking down, because that baby will eventually become the environment, because it is learning how to adapt to how everything is ran in that household, in that environment, in that family, in every household of that family. It is consistently in learning mode, because every household is going to be completely different, because every household is going to have completely different parents, and they're going to run things in their household completely different. The baby has to take in all of this stuff. So eventually the baby's going to become an outcome of the environment and just try to adapt to it to the best of its ability. So if you're adapting to the environment in a dysfunctional manner, so is the child, because the child learned from the best, learned from you. But the thing is with generational curses, and as it evolves, it goes through different time frames. And with different time frames, there is different coping mechanisms that they will have access to. Like, for example, certain time frames is where, they had a radio. There was a certain time frame where they had black and white TVs. And then eventually they had colored TVs. And eventually they had, different types of TVs, flat screen, concave, whatever, big, small, whatever, portable, whatever. And eventually, it went to, they had flip phones and, speak free after 9 o'clock p.m. I remember that. Speak free after 9 o'clock. I mean, there was all kinds of escaping. There's always going to be ways to escape the suffering, and that's basically coping mechanisms to deal with a lot of it. And how our ancestors dealt with it, usually it was addiction, sleep, However, because honestly, I can't really speak much on ancestors. I don't know any ancestors, but if you just look through a history book and look at what time frames they were living in, I mean, I'm pretty sure you can make up your own prediction. It's probably drug induced, sleeping, I, just like stuff like that, or eating, or to get involved with some kind of activity, to keep them distracted. And a lot of them use religion. There was religious structures that they would use. A lot of them did go to churches, temples, whatever, to abide with any kind of dysfunction that they couldn't deal with. Like, say you suffered from paranoia or something like that, they would just take you to a church. They would take you to a church, take you to a temple, whatever, and it's between you and God. You just are God's. You just let them deal with it. And for a long time, with lack of technology, religious structures were your dependency, because religious structures were considered normality. Because that's where people battled their own demons. They battled their own issues, because every individual has their own issues, because every individual adapts to an environment completely different. And if they are adapting incorrectly, well, therefore they are creating their own demons and scenarios that they may be dealing with mentally. And sure, some parentals may have their own coping mechanisms of certain things, but if you have something that has not been spoken of, or they have no idea about, well, that's when fear is going to strike the parent, and they are going to respond in a very abnormal manner. And it all comes from fear. It all comes from fear, because they can't help you. They can't help you, but they want to, but they can't. And usually the way they respond usually adds on to more trauma that created that, and it just makes the situation completely worse. Usually that's because they didn't recover from their childhood. They didn't come to terms with it. They didn't come to peace with it. So a lot of their reactions and the way they respond to certain things, especially when it comes to things that require, a responsible adult, they might respond incorrectly, but which is just going to make the matter worse. It's going to make problems worse, and that's when escaping becomes everything. The escaping becomes everything. To that individual, and the way they escape, how much they escape, is all up to them. How they manage it, what they do, it's all up to them, because they're dealing with their own individual suffering. And usually when it comes to stuff that they don't know about, that's usually something that has been passed down the family line. It might have been hidden. There are a lot of things that go on in families where they don't speak about their mental problems. They hide it. And when it starts to come up in their child, and it's something that they struggle with, that they have hidden, they will do the best to their ability to either make you feel alienated, like I've never heard of this, or they will try to inform you don't speak of that. You don't speak of that. You're normal. You are fine. That is not happening. Your imagination is just overactive. Yeah. You just need to get it under control. But some families will alienate, and until you understand that, until you can tell yourself that it's not happening, you will continuously be alienated for that one problem that you may be facing that you really need help with. But the thing is with the evolution of the generational curse, it evolved with every time frame. And with every time frame, there is advancements. And those advancements come to technology, and technology is used to escape, and that's usually how we deal with our suffering. And now, how previous generations respond to the evolution of, the generational curses evolving, and how each generation responds to the suffering with as we advance in technology, they are more timid. They're not going to want to advance. They're not going to want to learn your ways of dealing with things, because they have done things for a certain way for a certain period of time. They don't want to look into the new, because one thing that they are taught is you do not question. If you go into question and you start questioning things and you start to dabble into the unknown and start to go where a lot of people have not gone, you are going up territory that you should not be going up. You need to stick with what you know and just keep it like that. And so, for example, like, a lot of nowadays, a lot of people like smartphones. They use those. A lot of your elders first, they did not want to be a part of it, because their technology still worked fine. But the thing is as we advance in technology, eventually older technology started to die out. So pretty much it's like you can either be with us and evolve with us, or you're just going to have to deal with what you can get. So a lot of them eventually did evolve, but the thing is a lot of them responded differently. So I can't speak on every single one of our elders who had to evolve with technology and how we escape nowadays, because it's just they just have to get with the time. I mean, for example, like majority of them, it was TV. TV was everything. TV was everything. TV was the escape. But eventually, a lot of those TVs became incompatible with how things are being ran, and so they had no other option but to evolve with it. So they had to go with the flow, and so pretty much they were pretty much forced to evolve. But usually they're timid. They're scared because you're barking up unknown territory that you don't want to dabble into. Because if you start dabbling into something that is unknown, you don't know what the outcome of this unknown portion is going to lead. You want to stay with what you are familiar with. You have survived this long by doing this, that, and the other, and everything that you were taught. You don't want to learn brand new. But yeah, escaping will evolve. So if first it was one time radio, black and white TV, colored TV, and so on through each generation. Well, nowadays, phones, and everyone is going to use the phone completely different. Everyone's going to have apps that are beneficial for certain things that are completely different from someone else's phone. Everyone has their own way of dealing from escaping certain emotions through their phone. And it's not as simplistic as previous times when it comes to escaping, because if you're feeling a certain way, you can just pop in a movie, or you can just pop in the movie that fits the emotion that you may have been feeling, and now you can release it by watching this movie or watching this TV show, or where now you can use YouTube, you can watch your favorite TV channel, you can stream your favorite movie, you can play your favorite game. There's all on one device. Everything is on this one device. So it's far more complex, but the response mentally and how we respond to the screen is all going to be completely different from every individual, because every individual might be using it for a different coping mechanism. And but the thing is the more that we continue to escape our problems and our suffering, it's going to continue to pile up. Every individual has their own pile. Every individual has their own pile that they have added to over the years of suffering and dealing with trauma, and how they adapted to that trauma. Like, it all piles up during the escape period, because instead of a healing, you're choosing to escape these circumstances. But as you continue to get older, these circumstances will also evolve every single time, which means that you're going to be far more dependent on escaping with every year that goes by, because you're going to notice that, you know, those demons are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and stronger and stronger and stronger, because it's trying to wake you up. It's trying to wake you up. Like, are you going to sit there and escape from it? Or are you going to fight it out and sit with it? You know, a lot of the times people just escape because that's all they know. They saw their parents escape their demons, and their parents saw their parents just escaping the demons, and so on and so on and so on. But the demons are basically stuff that you refuse to work on, the suffering that you face. And instead of dealing with it, you escape from it. And when you escape from it, it just piles up and gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And, you know, the sweep under the rug mentality that is passed down from each generation, every generation, every individual has their own pile, and they just sweep it right under the rug. And with every generation that has a kid, that kid is introduced to that rug, and they are taught to sweep things under the rug as well, because that is what their parental's done. And when they become a parent, it's the same process. The rug gets dirtier and dirtier and dirtier and dirtier with every generation, and it is passed down to an innocent child, and that child has to deal with that rug, and they have an option. Are you going to clean this rug and be the difference in your family, or are you going to just do what they do and sweep your problems under the rug and live a life of denial?